Joe Rogan's name is echoed across the world.
Joe Rogan is the king of podcasts.
Primarily known for his extremely successful podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan has built an empire with his entertaining personality, controversial opinions, and thought-provoking discussions.
My point of doing this is always just to create interesting conversations and ones that I hope people enjoy.
Behind the scenes of this celebrity, beyond the hours of enthralling interviews, there is a more tormented and hurtful story.
My real father was crazy. He was like a psychotic person.
A story of a broken family, trauma, abandonment, and of a father-son relationship that was not like any other.
Lied about me. Your father. If you lied about your father, what do you give up the world?
Joe Rogan grew up in a childhood filled with love, but it was also marked by a lot of confusion and fear. Born in August 1967 to Joseph Rogan Sr. and Susan LMO, young Joe idolized his father like some sort of hero. To him, Joseph Sr. was this towering figure, strong and imposing, seemingly all a child could look up to. However, like many children, this idealistic image of his father was about to be swiftly shattered by some hard, cruel realities of life. When Joe was 5 years old, his parents divorced. Joe and his mother moved west, settling in San Francisco, while his father remained behind in New Jersey, continuing his career as a police officer. From that day forward, Joe would have no more contact with his father. The separation would mark the beginning of a long, painful estrangement between father and son. As the years went by and Joe reached puberty, he started looking at his father from another angle. What once was the strength of a hero now had something darker laced within it. Joe started realizing that his father wasn't the man he once admired, but a violent and unpredictable figure who caused more harm than good. Joe's memories of his father are of violence and anger. In a 2015 interview with Rolling Stone, Joe spoke candidly about his father's behavior, describing the man as a very violent, scary guy.
My real father was crazy. He was like a psychotic person.
He recounted flashbacks of domestic violence, revealing moments of his father lashing out and causing pain to those around him. All I remember of my dad are these brief, violent flashes of domestic violence, Joe said candidly in that interview. That was probably the most vivid detail in a relationship which none of them wanted. It indeed had left indelible marks on Joe's mind. The most harrowing experience which Joe remembered in the series related to the incident in which his father physically assaulted his mother and a cousin. He elaborated how his father grabbed his cousin and threw him into the room while taking a hold of his hair. Along with this violent display of attitude, Joe's father also adopted a very insensitive and emotionally dead attitude. He specifically remembered how, after a fight with his cousin, his father had asked him whether he had cried. When Joe said yes, his father told him in a cold manner, "Good, never cry." That was the painful emotional journey for Joe, wherein he learned to suppress his emotions and hide his vulnerabilities, a trait that he would carry with him into adulthood. As Joe got older and began to establish a career, his father remained absent. When Joe started to gain popularity in the world of entertainment and podcasting, his father never phoned him to acknowledge his success or offer any words of encouragement. For years, Joe never heard from him. The silence was deafening, and the lack of closure was something Joe had to grapple with himself. It was years later, long after Joe became successful and had been amply rewarded for it, that his father suddenly started talking. If he was to do this, one wonders, why now? What would make Joseph Sr. break a decades-long silence? Was it about reconciliation, or was there more to it? Then came the unlikely and strange turn of events when Joseph Sr. made a TikTok video at age 81 addressing his son's claims. He was seen fuming in the video as he demanded an apology from Joe. "You lied about me. Your father. I'm tired of it, Joe. I just had enough," he said in anger.
Lied about me. Your father. If you lied about your father, what do you give up the world?
In fact, Joseph Sr. also accused Joe of lying about him throughout the video. The one thing he calls me a drama queen. Too soft. He is not sure about any violence accusations, as he states he would never be on probation after beating kids and women around the village. comments from Joseph Sr. enraged netizens, who questioned why Joseph Sr. now wanted to be a part of Joe's life after he is famous and loaded with money. More people were quick to point out how hypocritical that was for any father who'd abandoned his son for years, only to want in again when it felt right for him. Some people questioned whether Joseph Sr. was actually interested in healing old wounds, or if he was simply looking to capitalize on Joe's fame and fortune. In a further twist, Joseph Sr.'s half-sister weighed in, defending their father and presenting a different narrative. She described their father as a kind man who had never raised a hand to being angry and gave her and her siblings a very happy childhood. "Growing up, my sister and I just had such a happy childhood," she said. "I just can't tell everybody enough what a great father we have." She invited Joe to come and talk with their father in person to clear the air. While she made her half-sister look good with a loving father, the internet quickly weighed in on Joe's side, pointing out glaring contradictions in the stated behavior of his father. After all, it was the same man who abandoned his son while still young, never provided emotional support as a father would do, and never spoke for decades when Joe struggled in life due to that childhood trauma. And that is not all. Joe's father further said a lot more strange and accusing things about his son, putting the softness in Joe's tone and unwillingness to fight his past as weakness. He even referred to Joe as a drama queen since he didn't stand up for himself and was unable to handle the real world. But what really raised eyebrows was when Joseph Sr. implied that there was something reprehensible about Joe being gay. Now, it certainly seemed that the tussle between those two had reached such a low point that each obstinately clung to his version of truth and assailed the others. Despite his father's attempts to regain entry into his life and the press tour his half-sister went on defending him, Joe remained steadfast in his decision to sever ties with his father. Whenever asked about his father in interviews, Joe replied with a shrug and a detached remark. "Yeah, allegedly. Positively." His indifference spoke volumes. Years of pain, neglect, and emotional trauma had left Joe unwilling to engage in a fruitless battle with someone who had been absent for so long. But at the core of Joe's story is not the continuing dysfunction of his relationship with his father, but rather in the ways he has chosen to rise above it. The painful childhood and tumultuous relationship with his father shaped him into what he is today, but they drove him to break the cycle of abuse and neglect that for years seemed to be perpetuated from generation to generation. Having children of his own, Joe has consciously worked at giving his kids the love, support, and guidance he never got. "Talk to them, communicate with them," he said in an interview. "I didn't have a good childhood, so for me, it's important to be a good dad." Joe has broken free from the patterns of his past and has become the father he always wished he had. He has worked to ensure that his children will never experience the same hurt and emotional scars that he did. Joe Rogan's story of a broken childhood to today's most successful and influential figure in the world shows the resilience and strength of the man. Despite trauma and abandonment, Joe forged his own path and created a life for himself and his family founded on love, communication, and emotional support. His is a story of survival, healing, and transformation. The powerful reminder that even when a life is filled with adversity, it is truly possible to put the past behind and start working for a brighter future. Whether Joe's father is motivated by the desire to heal old wounds, or if this is just one more try at repairing a fractured ego, is anybody's guess. The truth may never be known, and perhaps at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Joe has moved on, and in so doing, he shows the world that it is never too late to break away from the past and make something better.